What you know, alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Sunday, September 14th. Been a hot minute since I've done an episode. It was right before I left for CrimeCon, and I've been home almost a week. So I figured it was time to get back in the groove. Now, we all know that Donna was found guilty and had her little outburst right after that verdict was read. The jury had to be removed, all that drama. But what I plan to do today is bring in some of the juror interviews that have taken place over the past week and get a little bit of their take on what they experienced throughout the trial and in the deliberation room. And then we're going to go over the victim impact statements by Dan's parents after everything was wrapped up regarding the verdict. I have filed a records request with Leon County to try and get phone calls from Donna after her arrest. Those have not been public since she was arrested, but I'm hoping we have some luck. And depending on how much they cost, we'll see what we can get. I really want to do a CrimeCon recap episode because, y'all, I had a blast. It was amazing to have Fruit Loop and Brienne there. Fruit Loop, my old co-host who I started this podcast with over 5 years ago, had their own booth for the hiding place, their domestic violence safe haven. My parents and my oldest daughter were able to be there, and it was so awesome meeting all of the alibiers, seeing old friends, and hopefully gaining some new listeners. So if you're new to the podcast, I want to give you a big welcome. Normally, I post more frequently. It's just been a week, y'all. One thing that a lot of people have noticed about these trials is this very common progression, which is in Katie's trial. The prosecutor talked a lot about Charlie. Then he was arrested. Then you have Donna being a lot of the focus in Charlie's trial. And then later, as we know, Donna was arrested. In Donna's trial, there was a lot of talk of Wendy. And the big question is, will Wendy be arrested? We'll just have to wait and see. The trial lasted just over 2 weeks, and she was the fifth person to be found guilty in the murder, although we know Rivera pleaded guilty and gave a proffer which told what happened. We're going to start out with Ruth Markel's victim impact statement, and I will tell you guys, Donna shaked her head so much that her brain had to have been bumping all around in that noggin. I'm not reading these victim impact statements in full. I will link everything that I talk about in the description, including the link to the full juror interview, so you can go watch those for yourself. We're just going to wrap some things up. Mrs. Markel said that Dan was a hero to his boys, and they've been forced to grow up without a father. His murder has shattered our family and caused deep, permanent pain. And his murder was revenge, orchestrated by his former mother-in-law and co-conspirators. A murder of selfishly prioritizing one's own desires over what is just or right. And at its core, it was a murder of convenience, so a grandmother could live closer to her grandchildren. She killed their father and ripped the children from the other grandparents' lives. Her crimes against Dan began long before the murder. She belittled him in front of his children, she spread lies, and contributed to a brutal separation between Dan and Wendy. Her eagerness for Wendy to divorce Dan and relocate to South Florida led her to increasingly desperate schemes. The judge ruled Wendy couldn't relocate, and failing to achieve her goal through the legal system, Donna resorted to orchestrating Dan's murder plot. That led to further devastation, with her son Charlie being convicted and sentenced to life in prison for his role in the murder. Rob Adelson, Donna's oldest son, is an honest and decent man. Estranged from the family, and her youngest child, Wendy, has decided once again to relocate to another state. These actions have all caused other children to lose their parents, and she mentions Katie and Sigfredo's children, Rivera's, as well as Charlie, have all lost access to their children. Donna blames an external force as a curse on her family. She is the curse that angrily lashes out. But Danny's death was not enough. Danny had to be fully erased from his beloved sons, and the boy's last name was changed. An extraordinary decision to excise the Markel name from Phil's only grandsons who shared his last name. After the arrest, Donna did not allow the Markel family to access the boys for over 6 years. A Tallahassee advocacy group passed the Markel Act. That was followed by our first invitation to see the boys after the arrests. The door only remained cracked open despite these efforts, and we remain excluded from the boys' lives. We weren't at their bar mitzvahs or graduations. We only have highly choreographed visits and communications. We wait for the day Benjamin and Lincoln will visit their father and his grave and their father's history in Toronto. They were only toddlers when Danny was murdered, and now they're forced to confront and try to understand the unthinkable crimes of murder and the Adelsons' involvement. She asked the court to impose the maximum sentence. Moving on to Phil Markel's victim impact statement. He says, "This is addressed to you, the judge, and the Adelsons, Harvey, Charlie, Wendy, and particularly Donna. I want them to understand and reflect on the deep and irreparable damage they've caused. They've also caused lifelong harm to us and their own family. Donna's cruelty and disrespect for human life, along with her co-conspirators, have left families forever broken. For Donna, someone who claims to care so much about Ben and Lincoln, her sunshines, her actions are beyond comprehension. She has forever harmed the people she claims to have loved. In the Jewish custom, we have an expression to always wish others to live to 120 years of age. For Donna, I wish for her to live to 120 alone in her jail cell. I wish that every day of her remaining days, she thinks about the harm she has caused to so many, especially those two boys she claimed to have loved so much." He asked the court to sentence Donna to the maximum sentence, and then he says, "My only short question to Donna, was it worth it?" That was it. Again, those are linked in the description. I highly encourage you to go watch for yourself because it will hit you straight in the heart. So she was found guilty on all counts in just over 3 hours. She had that outburst. She was reprimanded very quickly by Judge Everett. And in fact, he had to send the jury out for Donna to compose herself. After the guilty verdict, Prosecutor Cappleman gave a presser. When she came outside, there was a lot of cheering. She felt honored to be able to deliver this case and win for the Markels. When asked about being a prosecutor in cases like these that go on, she reminds everybody she has other cases and she cares about all of them, but obviously, this case has become part of her DNA. After investing so much blood, sweat, and tears to get justice, and it's been an epic battle. As far as whether this trial was harder for her opposed to Charlie's, she laughed and said she's older now. But as more time passes, there's more emails, more phone calls, more records. It's a lot to organize and a lot of pieces to try and put together. And also to put it together for a jury so that they can follow along and wrap their head around everything. She was asked if whether defense attorney Jackie Fulford calling Dan Danny in her openings bothered her. Prosecutor Cappleman said not as much as it bothered others. She understood what she was trying to do, but it wasn't the classiest move, and maybe she realized that and then tried to correct it over the course of the trial, but not the classiest move. The deliberations for Donna before a verdict was reached took a few more minutes than Charlie. Prosecutor Cappleman grins and says that she lost. She thought it would be slightly shorter, but she also says it wouldn't have surprised her if it was more difficult for them because it was a large puzzle that had to be put together. But in the end, these jurors got what they needed and knew what they had to do. They talk about Donna throwing Charlie and Wendy under the bus. But Donna also kind of adopted Charlie's defense of extortion. The prosecutor didn't want Donna to be able to distance herself from Charlie's defense and then create a new and better defense, which she said seemed to be what Donna was doing. So they wanted to shove that on Donna, meaning the extortion defense that Charlie put up. She said it was a bit of a minefield to explain all that to the jury, but they wanted to show Donna's already committed to this defense, which was a losing defense. And now she's trying to switch it up and go in another direction. And you have to pick a line. It can't be both. The new investigation had phone calls they wanted to introduce, but they were not allowed to. Those are sealed for now, and she really just did not want to comment on those. When Donna had to decide about testifying, Prosecutor Cappleman said she put a lot of prep into that and was kind of sad when she had to put away her binder that had 110 tabs. She said she was a little surprised because Donna seems like somebody who would want to tell her story, but she also acknowledges there's a lot out there, and it would have put Donna in a position where she had to navigate a lot of tricky stuff. The prosecutor thinks it was a smart decision for her not to take the stand, but she did expect her to. she thinks that Donna trying to flee to Vietnam helped with their case because Donna denied it, where she could have said, yeah, I was going so I wouldn't get arrested. And Donna overselling that was very helpful to the prosecution. In finding Donna's planners, she said that was really just dumb luck. The planners were very dense and there were a bunch of them. But as they were going through these planners, someone stumbled upon something that she didn't specify in the presser. I would imagine it would be where they found Dan's car information as well as his license plate number. She thinks Rob Adelson was so genuine on the stand and said he was in a terrible situation, but he rose above all that and doing the right thing was impressive. As far as why they had never put him on the stand prior to Donna's trial, she said she really just didn't want to do that to Rob unless it was absolutely necessary, and she felt they really did need him for Donna's trial. Later on, when we get into some of the jurors' interviews, they expressed they found him to be a very credible witness, so obviously a great decision by Prosecutor Cappleman. When asked if Wendy had a reason to be worried the night of the verdict, or if we need to stay tuned, she said, you can stay tuned, and it was kind of in a joking way. They didn't call Charlie to the stand because they really just didn't want to tangle with him unless they had to. They felt they were able to get out the story he told at his trial and then marry that to Donna's trial without actually having to call him. They were able to get some WhatsApp messages from Donna's device directly. And just a side note here, in other trials we have seen with the encryption WhatsApp has, it can be hard or even impossible to get messages from there, but luckily they were in this case. As far as Donna's trial being delayed a while back, she points out they would not have had these jailhouse informants and the letter from Drina Bernhardt. And Prosecutor Cappleman said when she was showed that, it was like Christmas Day. She's asked about Wendy's name being mentioned more at this trial, and the prosecutor says it's because of who the defendant was and also to establish the motive through communications between Donna and Wendy. She says there's no justice for Dan's boys. She said she did them no favors today in convicting Donna, and she said she would lose sleep over that. She wishes them nothing but the best, but points out the family has been destroyed, and sometimes it feels like she has been a part of that. She hopes that someday they can reconnect with Dan's family. Prosecutors Dugan and Cappleman, just an amazing performance at this trial like every other, where they really broke this very convoluted story down that takes some of us years to completely understand, and again, get a guilty verdict. So hats off to them, and I don't think we have seen the last prosecution in this case, but time will tell. Moving on to juror number 6. He did an interview with Scripps News in Tallahassee. He's 24 years old, and he said actually this trial put him on a new career path. He changed his major from engineering to pre-law, and I think that's amazing. He said he took about 4 pages of notes during the trial, but about halfway through the first week, he realized it really wasn't helping him retain too much. So he got to where he would only jot down points that he would have for deliberations. As far as what motivated his guilty verdict, he said, going in, I was leaning towards guilty after seeing all of the evidence laid out. He did try to stay on the fence until they actually got into the deliberation room because he said Donna deserved to have that unbiased. When they first got in the room, he expected there would be an eruption of talking, but he said it was actually really quiet, and everybody was like, where do we start? Once they looked at the jury instructions, that got the ball rolling, so they went count by count. For first-degree murder, he felt pretty confident she was guilty, so they went around to see where everybody was, but a few jurors were not so sure, especially after going through the jury instructions because of the specific way you have to come to your verdict, like finding intent before the murder was committed. That was one thing a few of the jurors were hung up on. He said it was mainly what came in the years after, where most of the evidence was collected against Donna. Regarding some of the key pieces for him personally that influenced his verdict, first off was the bump. He said innocent people don't speak in code, and when the bump happened, she was just handed that sheet of paper. She took the paper and put it straight into her bag without even looking at it. He said, I'm not taking anything from anyone and putting it in my bag before looking at it. Another big influence for him was Rob Adelson's testimony. He said that Rob had so much more insight into Donna that they personally didn't get to see. As far as the murder charge, he said, we spent probably the first hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours of the little over 3 that they deliberated on that charge. Just talking about the first count and laying out all of the evidence and then digging through everything they wanted to go back and look at again. Once they all got to guilty for count 1, the other counts were easier to go back and find her guilty on those charges. They did pull out some of the phone calls to go through again. He said they briefly spoke about Wendy in the deliberation room, but points out she was not on trial, so they mainly focused on the jury instructions and only discussing Donna. He said Charlie being convicted had nothing to do with whether he thought Donna was involved or not. State Attorney Jack Campbell said they will continue to work to hold everyone accountable for Dan's murder, but as of now, he cannot predict anything for the future. Now, the jury foreperson has also spoken out. She's very young. She has a TikTok, which I will link in the description so you can go watch her videos that she's done on the case. She's also been interviewed on a couple of podcasts. I've sent her a message asking her to come on here. Fingers crossed we can get her to come on and tell her story. From her TikTok, she said as the foreperson, she really wanted to watch the other jurors' body language and facial expressions once deliberations began, just to be sure they were all on the same page. There were 2 people who thought Donna was guilty, but they got confused on certain points on the count. She said, okay, we're not unanimous, and so they went over things piece by piece. They used a whiteboard to go over each point and list out things that applied to those other little points within the count. She said the ones who seemed unsure at first really seemed to be helped by that visual. They went over things several times to be sure. And she said they were mindful that this was the rest of Donna's life. They voted several times in different ways by each count and the points within the count, and then they all agreed on guilty. After that, she passed papers around for people to write their verdict on again, and all were guilty. And then before filling out the final verdict form, she had them one by one say their verdict again. They were all guilty, and so they knocked for the bailiffs to let them know they had reached a verdict. Now, after Donna's outburst, they were sent back, and when they came back in the room, they had to one by one say that was their verdict. She does think Wendy is involved and thinks that Wendy and Harvey could be next. She said it could be that there's different charges because of how Wendy insulated herself from the family and played dumb. One big thing that makes her think Wendy could be next is how would the killers know Dan's routine? She also talked about the number of I don't remembers from Wendy's testimony, which to her had guilt written all over it. They didn't discuss it in deliberations, but they did talk about Wendy's testimony because it was relevant to coming to that verdict, and it stayed on point as far as their discussions regarding Wendy. After being released from their service, they were escorted to their cars, and they were allowed to talk, and everybody thinks Wendy will be next. She also thought that the route Wendy took to the liquor store, which as we know was very much out of the way, was suspicious. And then, after seeing the roadblock, not checking in on Dan or the boys was a big red flag for her. She said the officer's testimony where he said you would be able to see Dan's house from the roadblock, and then Wendy denying that she saw it was in front of Dan's house, and also the fact that she whipped her car out of there where others would do a looky-loo. She said it just doesn't add up. She thought it was weird. Wendy told Jeff Lacasse about Charlie looking into hiring a hitman and the fact that Jeff didn't report it. Another thing that stood out to the jury foreperson is the last meeting Wendy and Jeff had at yoga, where he knew the relationship was over, but she still asked about his upcoming travel, as well as Rivera and Garcia driving a very similar car to Jeff's that first trip up to Tallahassee. She does think Wendy was trying to set Jeff up for Dan's murder. As for the kids, calling them Adelson before Dan was shot, changing the oldest child's middle name, and not taking the kids to the funeral was just very suspicious to her. She said Judge Everett really cares about his jurors, and she notes they were not allowed to stay for victim impact statements. They were escorted out. On Surviving the Survivor podcast, juror number 5 spoke out. He was in active duty in the Marines when the murder happened, so he knew nothing about this case. He would watch Donna's body language when Wendy and Rob Adelson were on the stand to see how she reacted to their testimony. He said the prosecution's opening statements and laying out that timeline made it very easy for him to pick up and understand where we are at this point with this trial. And as the trial progressed, it really came full circle for him. He kept an open mind until deliberations, but he thought the defense was really behind the 8 ball once he heard their openings, and he felt they didn't have a strong case to present. He was asked if he has looked up anything about the case. He said he's not a big social media guy, but he's talked to others, and also he has watched some videos, which gave him a good understanding of the other players or the other co-conspirators. As far as witnesses, he thought Sergeant Corbett was on point and an outstanding witness, as well as Rob Adelson. As for Rob, he thought it was heartbreaking to watch him on the stand and just struggled through his testimony. He said he could tell the pain Rob was in, and the heartbreak on his face and his words was really impactful for this juror. One thing Rob talked about that really stood out to this juror was that last phone call Rob had with Donna where she was avoiding questions and got off the phone very quickly. Just a reminder, this was after the arrest of Sigfredo. He really didn't think there was any witness put up by the defense that swayed any of the jurors. And in fact, the witness Linda Bailey, who came on talking about the divorce, saying it was amicable, and she mentioned $80,000 isn't a lot of money. He said they knew from the emails and the text messages that the divorce was not amicable. And the script that Donna wrote for the jailhouse informant was one piece of evidence that if anyone had any doubts, it was obvious it was Donna's handwriting and her doings. He was also stunned at the fact that Donna literally washed the money. As far as Donna taking the stand, he didn't think she would have done herself any favors in doing so. He felt Donna's defense team was just unprepared. Also, with the bump, just putting the paper in her purse was a big thing for him. And as far as one single thing that might have sealed the deal for him, he would have to say Donna and Charlie talking in code. Also, Donna talking about dressing the boys in Hitler costumes was a good glimpse into her character for him. He did find Jeff Lacasse to be a very credible witness. Didn't give much thought of Wendy going to the liquor store far away from where she could have, and he says he will personally drive past 6 convenience stores to go to his favorite. But by day 4 or 5, he said he was leaning guilty. He said if he were Wendy, he would be nervous. He thinks she was 100% involved. He specifically mentioned Donna having Dan's license plate in her planner. There's no way Donna would drive up to Tallahassee to get it, so that had to have come from Wendy. As far as a sentencing date for Donna, we don't have one as far as I know. Now, she does have a case management hearing that is scheduled for October 14th to discuss further proceedings, and that final sentencing will be determined at that time or even later. Of course, I will run that hearing live on October 14th. And we will see what happens next. I mean, who knows? We may get an alert any day on our phone that Wendy has been arrested, or we could be waiting on an alert for quite a while. There is no statute of limitations in Florida, and I have no doubt Prosecutor Cappleman is going to have her case ready to go before she ever goes that route, if she does. So that's it. And if more people speak out about their experience on the jury, I will definitely do a follow-up episode. Again, I apologize that this is late. When I got back from CrimeCon, I was notified that a student that I taught her senior year in a special ed class, who I've kept in very close contact with over the years, passed away suddenly. So it's been a bit of a tough week for me, just trying to come to grips with that. And it took some time to be mom and granddaughter and everything else. But I'm glad to be back in the swing of things. This week, I may see if there are some new Corey Richens documents, or we may dive into the Barry Morphew charging documents. And even though that is not new, I was covering Lori Daybell out in Phoenix when all that came down. So I do plan on following that case. And y'all know I like to do my backstories where I read these charging documents and the probable cause affidavits. So that is sort of my plan for this week, unless something crazy happens and we go in another direction. Also, at CrimeCon, just meeting these families who are still waiting to hear any news of their missing loved ones, whether it be recent or decades old, has really just touched my heart. I want to start doing a missing persons series where we cover a couple of missing person cases maybe once a week. And also, the first case that I want to deep dive is the Megan Trussell case. I was fortunate enough to meet her beautiful parents at CrimeCon. And although her death was ruled self-harm, there's a lot of indications there it is not the right call. I'm currently looking into the documents, but there are just a lot of things there that do not add up. And we've seen this with the Ellen Greenberg case, where clearly there is a wrong determination of a cause of death. So I do want to research this thoroughly. So look for that in the next week or so. Friday, my grandmother has a procedure on her heart. Saturday, I'm speaking at Taekwondo's funeral. And also, my daughter's moving back from New Orleans. So the first few days of the week, we'll definitely have some episodes. But later in the week, it might be a little bit quiet. And then the week after that, we're going to go full swing again. So that is it for now. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon.